It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Jenn Cohen as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's Countywide.
Hello and welcome to Countywide. I'm your host, Jenn Cohen. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we're talking about Sedona In Motion. We're sitting here with Karen Osburn, who is the Assistant City Manager of Sedona, and Stephen Craver, who's the Engineering Supervisor of Sedona. Sedona In Motion, you might have heard about this. It's collective projects for transportation and transit improvements in the Sedona area. But it affects everybody, which I think is cool. I don't think it doesn't just affect the Sedona people. It affects people moving through Sedona or traveling back and forth from Flagstaff. So it's a really huge project. Are you overwhelmed yet?
It's pretty overwhelming. The Transportation Master Plan, there are 13 strategies within that plan, and within those strategies there are multiple projects and programs. So yeah, it's a lot. It's anticipated to be over the course of 10 years, but we've really just jumped right in, and many of those projects are simultaneously in the works as we speak right now.
Right. There's so much going on. We last talked about this on Countywide back in the spring, and the surveys were still going on, and the projects were still being outlined, and the options were still being outlined. Where are we at now, Stephen?
So there's a variety of projects that are in the works. The one that's probably furthest along is when we say Sedona In Motion, we use the acronym SIM just to make it a little bit easier. But SIM 1 is our Uptown Roadway improvements project, and we're about 60% complete with that design. So that project's expected to kick off construction kind of after the spring peak season. And that project's going to entail a couple of roundabouts in the Uptown area, as well as a median through that corridor that will restrict left-hand turns and channelize pedestrians to approved crossings. Second southbound lane out of Oak Creek Canyon. So really a lot of efficiency we expect to see gained through that project and reducing those travel times through Oak Creek Canyon.
I like how you use the word efficiency. It seems to me that all these projects are designed around efficiency of motion, of the transient, of everyone getting from place to place, making it more efficient in Sedona, which is great, but not really efficient at the moment. So I can understand now the surveys you guys did took how long?
Well, throughout the process of developing the Transportation Master Plan itself, there were numerous surveys, business surveys, visitor surveys, resident surveys, and those were over the course of, 18 months, maybe 2 years even. As we moved through each of the sort of iterations of the plan, we continued to do outreach, so surveys, public meetings, focus groups, and those kinds of things to be able to incorporate the feedback from the community into developing the ultimate strategies that were identified in the plan.
Right. And public feedback is important, it seems. I mean, tonight you've got a meeting tonight at 4:30 at the City Council chambers in Sedona. What's happening at the meeting tonight, Stephen?
So it's just a general update of the Sedona In Motion program. So we'll be touching on a few different projects, the largest of which that we'll be focusing on is a Forest Road connection project, which Forest Road is the first signal you come to in Uptown if you're heading northbound. And the intent is to extend that road down to 89A west of the post office, which would basically give residents an alternate route to essentially avoid the congestion in Uptown and the intersection of the state routes 89A and 179. So basically, if they want to get to West Sedona to go to the grocery store and get back home, they don't have to go through that congested area. So of course, it has impacts on a few private business owners potentially. So really what we did is we sent out a survey to all of the residents in Uptown at Council's direction to understand how utilized would this connection be. So out of 660 parcels in Uptown, we actually got 330 responses, so almost 50%, roughly 50%, which is a pretty phenomenal response rate. And the results seem to be positive. People did think it was a good idea and that it would be utilized, but again, Council has a difficult decision to determine, is that still worth pursuing in light of the fact that there are certainly property owners that could be impacted by the connection.
Well, sure, absolutely. And Karen, what do you do when you have a percentage of folks that are for it and then a small percentage of folks that are against it. How do you weigh the viability of the project at that point?
Well, ultimately, these decisions are not ours, and they are those of the City Council, the elected body. So, you know, they're put in oftentimes a very difficult position in making these decisions. Do you do something that may benefit the whole, but you may have a number of folks who are negatively impacted because it's either, you know, going through their property or next to their property, and they don't want that. So, for example, we do have, one of the strategies is to do small neighborhood connections, because right now we have a network of streets that isn't very connected, and to get anywhere, in West Sedona in particular, you really have to get to 89A. You have to go to 89A and then go, and then, so these neighborhood connections would provide some options for residents to get to other locations within West Sedona. As we started to roll out some of those specific connections, the property owners and the homeowners immediately adjacent were, by and large, not supportive of that because of the impacts it would have to them. So at this point, that was a difficult decision for council, but they've made the decision to put those on an indefinite hold until we get one of those connections or a situation in which residents are actually supportive. So if the connections that ultimately will serve them, if they're not interested in having those, then we're not going to pursue them.
Well, sure, you wouldn't spend the money on something people don't want.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't make sense. Yeah. So where are we at in the project now? What's happening at the moment, Stephen? Where are we headed?
Well, like I said, so there is, you know, at the update tonight, there'll be a lot more information. So if people are interested, please do tune into that. But there are a couple other projects that were in progress, one of which is looking at adding what we call slip lanes at the Ys, you know, the intersection, the roundabout of 89A and 179, where basically people that are turning right to head north towards Uptown or turning right to head southbound on 179 can basically avoid the roundabout itself and kind of make that free right-hand turn without having to yield to vehicles in the roundabout. So we're partnering with ADOT on that project. We've got an IGA approved by council, so we're at the very kind of preliminary stages of that, of looking at ADOT would be the managing agency for that project, and we'd be contributing funding for that project. We're also looking at a study for the crosswalk near Tlaquepaque, where we have a lot of pedestrian activity that impacts both northbound 179 and northbound 89A. We're looking at some feasibility options of could we build a bridge or an underpass or a multi-use path that goes under the existing Oak Creek Bridge, or just additional pedestrian control. So kind of exploring some options there as well is another big project we're looking at.
Okay. Yeah. Now, on any given project, is the one that's the closest along, do you expect to see shovels in the ground sometime beginning of next year, you think?
Right, so the one with the furthest along on is the Uptown Roadway Improvements project I spoke about earlier, and that one we're hoping to be under construction kind of after the spring peak season. So sometime in May is our current goal. You know, kind of as we finish up design, that's what we're looking at.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Karen, where's the funding come from, real quick, because we have to take a break? But
sure. The council earlier this year implemented a half-cent sales tax that is dedicated specifically to Transportation Master Plan projects and the implementation. That is supposed to sunset after 10 years or when we get as many projects completed as they feel comfortable with and that we've made some good progress. And we've pursued grants. We have other private funding sources for some of the other projects, but the bulk of it's going to come from that dedicated sales tax.
Okay, excellent. If you want some more information, go to SedonaAZ.gov. All kinds of information there on Sedona In Motion, or SIM. Of course, if you want to go to the meeting tonight, it's at 4:30 at the City Council chambers in Sedona. Don't go away, because we've got lots more countywide. We'll be right back.
Wherever in the Verde Valley, all day, every day. Take Cottonwood Area Transit through Clarkdale, Verde Village, and from 26 locations in Cottonwood. With Verde Links, it's a quick and easy trip to Sedona every day. Don't forget our connectors to Camp Verde. Visit cottonwoodaz.gov for Cottonwood Area Transit and take a seat. Let's go ride.
How I define making In the broadest possible terms, it is making something extant in the world that didn't exist. Everybody who's ever made anything is bringing something into fruition for a reason, and that act in and of itself makes us stewards of our culture. It's something that we're talking about. It's a response. Actually, it's telling a story. That's really what it is. And I include everything that could be made: painting, sculpture, welding, all of that.
Yellow is positive.
When a kid gets their hands on the world and learns that they can make their fantasy play, that they can make their reality, that's power. And as far as I'm concerned, everyone should feel that kind of power. There we go. If there's something that interests you to bring into the world, that's fantastic. Go figure out how to do it. Go tell your own story. There it is. And so I want to know why you make. Let's go.
Share your own Why I Make story today. Visit whyimake.org.
150 over 90.
180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it, or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
And welcome back to Countywide. We're talking about Sedona In Motion. You can check out sedonaaz.gov. We're talking about the SIM project, the Sedona In Motion, which is about traffic improvements and transient improvements and all kinds of improvements happening in the Sedona area, which affects everybody, not just Sedona residents. If you travel anywhere through there, you're going to want this to happen. So tonight there's a meeting at 4:30 at the City Council chambers in Sedona. If you're interested in attending that and getting the full update, we only have so much time. But we now have with us Bruce Morrow, who's the transportation manager of Cottonwood. See, I told you it affected everybody. So we've got Cottonwood representing now, too. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jen.
Now, we just went through it with Karen. We just talked about where the funding comes from. That little bit of a half-cent sales tax makes such a big difference, you know, and it's primarily paid by tourists. That's the understanding.
Yep.
You know, so it doesn't affect the locals too much. So we can't come from that angle of, wow, it's costing me so much money. Really, if you don't shop,
Right.
you know, it doesn't cost you any money. So good job figuring that one out. I bet that was challenging. Now, when you get together with all these different cities and all these different jurisdictions, what kind of mess do you have to deal with in order to get anything done?
Well, Bruce and I specifically have been working on transit. And there were two strategies identified within the master plan that discussed transit and recommended transit. One was a visitor focus, one was a resident focus. What we've really been trying to do is figure out how to merge those into one system, maybe phases, maybe pieces, but that can address both visitor needs and resident needs. That's been something historically that's been pretty challenging for the greater Sedona region. The city's only 18 square miles, so we control a fairly small portion of where transit is needed. Beyond just the city limits. And we're talking about having to have ADOT at the table, the U.S. Forest Service, who controls kind of the underlying roads and what happens there. In the canyon, it's a very difficult area to navigate transit or shuttles. There isn't much shoulders or pull-offs or areas for stops to occur. Right now, there is no transit connection to the VOC. So Yavapai County and Coconino County, because the city is split between both counties, so both of those jurisdictions have to be involved in any decision making that happens with transit, as well as state parks, because Slide Rock is kind of the key destination in Oak Creek Canyon, which is one of our most congested areas. And in order to make transit work, they really need to work with us in terms of either limiting parking, potentially having, you know, a permitting type system, or really everything that we can do to get those vehicles off of the road and onto a transit system.
For sure. What kind of projects are you looking at, Bruce, as far as transit itself goes, as far as, you know, keeping cars off the road and yet still moving people?
Well, I think one of the first things that we're looking at a number of different things. Let me backtrack a little. One of the things that we want to do is provide a circulator service within the city of Sedona to all the hotels and resorts and potentially the trailheads that are located very close to Sedona in various different locations. The other part that we're trying to do is to add the link to the village of Oak Creek. That's going to be a bit of a challenge because, again, we have all these different jurisdictions that we have to deal with, and not only that, but the Sedona City Council and Cottonwood City Council have to approve any of the plans that we put together for transit. So it's quite a challenge.
I bet that's a lot of people in one room with different things to think about, all working on one project. So that's incredible. How far along are you on these ideas of this mass transit?
So we were fortunate enough to obtain a transit planning grant, some federal monies that passed through the state to us. So right now we have a $200,000 contract with a company called LSC Consulting out of Colorado, who are experts in transit planning, and they do a lot with rural, tourist, kind of federal parks even types destinations. So they have a lot of good expertise that they're bringing. We're about 50% through the study process right now. The first half has really been a lot of information gathering. So they've looked at previous studies, they're assessing current conditions. We've done a resident, a visitor, and a business survey, and they've done a number of focus groups. They've interviewed a lot of key stakeholders in some of these partner agencies, and they just yesterday afternoon, so it should be on our website within the next day or so, issued their second interim report, which has started to flesh out some of the service options. We'll be bringing those out to the public by beginning of February. They're going to roll those out to the key stakeholders and what we're calling our technical advisory group, which is those key agencies I represented, are mentioned in the beginning of January. We'll get feedback there, finalize or refine some of those options, and put them out to the public for feedback in February.
All right. Now, how's the budgeting looking? How about the cost of the projects? And
So,
where are we at there?
So,
big smiles on everybody.
You know, unlike many of our other projects, which are infrastructure, they're construction projects. So they're one-time funding for the most part. With transit, it's the majority of the cost is operations, and that's ongoing. So that's kind of a different thing to try to figure out how to fund. One of the items in the scope of work for the consultants is to make recommendations on both a governance structure. So who will operate it? Will it be a transit authority? Will it be Cottonwood, who runs the links and the CAT? Will it be the city or some other configuration of agencies to operate such a system? And then they'll also make some recommendations on how they think we can fund it on an ongoing basis. So more to come on that.
Well, yeah, sure. Well, I'm glad to hear that you think you're in the 50% of moving through. That's great. In the spring, it was just barely starting. So that's a lot of headway in a short period of time for a project that I've never seen such a big project to involve so many people, Bruce. Is this what you think about all the time, full time?
Well, it's kind of my job. I'm always trying to figure out different ways of getting people to where they want to go. That's kind of our catchphrase for Cottonwood area transit in general. There are a lot of people that need some kind of transportation. Mostly just getting to simple things like to the grocery store or to a doctor's office. What we're trying to put together in Sedona is something similar to what we have in Cottonwood, a full-blown transit system that services the needs of not only the residents, but can also serve the needs of any visitors to the area that might want to leave their car parked at the hotel and take the bus to wherever they want to go.
Oh, that's beautiful. Awesome. Okay, we're going to take another quick break, but we'll be right back. Check out SedonaAZ.gov. We're talking about Sedona in Motion, but don't go away because we've got more coming at you.
It appears these hot ashes are about to be dumped, which could possibly start a wildfire. How will Smokey deal with such a hot situation? The garden hose defense. Next, a thorough stir. Then another spray. And finally, feeling if the ashes are cool.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, yes, the selfie. A ritual practiced so frequently with this tribe, but not so much by Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Being prepared is a part of who you are, but it's especially important in the case of a disaster. Be informed about possible emergencies in your area. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency. Build a kit with the things you need to survive. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Start your plan today. Go to ready.gov/myplan.
And welcome back to Countywide. Just a few seconds left. We're talking about Sedona In Motion, or SIM. Go to sedonaaz.gov. We're talking with Bruce Morrow, who is the Transportation Manager of Cottonwood, and Karen Osburn, who's the Assistant City Manager of Sedona. Okay, so what's the difference for you, Karen? What do you see the transit, things, all these projects versus the other projects, the bypasses and all that?
Yeah, I mean, anything that's construction related is going to impact somebody. And from what we can tell so far, there is really widespread support for transit. We haven't heard a lot of opposition. The business community likes it because it's an amenity for their guests. It helps them with their employees, getting their employees to and from work. Certainly the residents see it as, even if they don't think they're going to use it themselves, they know that if we can get visitors on the shuttles instead of in their individual vehicles, then that's going to reduce congestion. So residents seem to support it as well. So it's really been something that, unlike the other projects, which tend to be controversial, so far we're in the 80% range on the surveys that we've done, that our local community supports it. And then we just got done completing some visitor intercepts where the consultants talked one-on-one with visitors at hotels, at trailheads, at campgrounds. And visitors are surprised that we don't have such a system already. So there seemed to be a real positive response in terms of desire to use such a system, to come into Sedona, park once, and use the shuttle to get around.
Well, certainly that would be delightful. But there's a lot of pieces to put together for that to happen, right, Bruce?
Well, there are. We need to get not only the community behind it, which they are, the two city councils and the Yavapai Board of Supervisors all have to kind of weigh in on this whole project. And then there's just the planning of the pieces of it and how it's all going to fit together with the current link system that's been doing quite well over the last few years, but it could be better. And so we're looking at ways to improve not only the number of trips that we make per day, but the length of time that it takes to get to and from. We're looking at ways of maybe adding buses or changing the schedules to allow for a wider variety of people to use the buses.
It sounds like a good plan. It definitely does. I can hear there's some challenges in there, getting all those pieces to fit into place. But from what you've said today and what you said in the spring, I really see it's moving along quite well. I'm impressed with your progress.
Yeah, we're pleased.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Check out sedonaaz.gov. If you go on that website, lots of information about the Sedona In Motion projects. Also, there's a meeting tonight at 4:30, if you can make it. And that's at the City Council chambers to give you an update as well. So much more information. I mean, we're out of time, but there's so much more we haven't covered. Karen, thank you for being here. Bruce, thank you for being here. And that's all the time we have for Countywide. So we'll see you again next time.